Congratulations, your offer's been accepted. But now what? Hi, I'm Ashley Hart. I'm a real estate expert here in DFW, and I'm here to make real estate a little more fun and a little less scary. Today, we're talking about what to do after your offer gets accepted. Now, most people think that getting the contract accepted is the end of the road. And in fact, it's the opposite. It's the beginning. You see, the contract is what sets in motion all of the different timelines that are built into the contract. And the very first and most important timeline is do not miss the delivery of your earnest money and your option fee. Now in Texas, we have something a little bit unique, and we have what's called an option period. The option period is your unrestricted right to terminate a contract. You can show up to the house and decide that there's too many mosquitoes and walk away. And as long as you do it within the specified time period of that contract, then the only thing that you lose is your option fee. However, if you do not deliver that earnest money and option fee within the time specified, which is 3 days, then you do not have an option period. So if you deliver it on day 4, you do not have the right to terminate and walk away. So that is why the very first thing that you need to do as a buyer in Texas is make sure that your earnest money and your option fee are delivered on time. Failure to deliver these funds on time is so rare that I've only seen it twice in my entire career. And the first time was because the buyer intended to terminate. And they delivered their option fee on time, but they didn't deliver their earnest money on time. And they did that because they didn't want that percentage held up in escrow at the title company. So they delivered the money that they needed to deliver in order to walk away from the contract and nothing more. And the second time that I saw it was most recently about 2 months ago, where the buyer didn't understand the contract fully and they delivered it within the 3 days, but it wasn't received by the title company on time. And so there was this back and forth deliberation between the agents and the title company and some attorneys to decide what constitutes delivery. Now, at the end of the day, the buyer wanted to buy and the seller wanted to sell, and so we made it work and we got through to the closing table. But all I can say is please, please, please make sure that that is at the top of your list and that you follow it to a T, because time is of the essence for the delivery of these funds. Now that you've got the money delivered, the very next thing you need to do is schedule an inspection. Now think about your general inspector as a general practitioner. They're going to know a little bit about a lot of things, and they're going to identify areas where you need to bring out a specialist. So don't worry about scheduling all of the specialists up front. Save your money for the general inspection, and then we'll take it from there. Typically, you can get a general inspector on the books within 2 to 3 days of calling them. Now, if it takes longer than that, we want to make sure that we ask the seller to accommodate an extension of the option period, because what you don't want to do is miss that window to have the inspection performed during your option period. At that point, you can negotiate if you want to reduce the sales price, if you want to ask for the seller to perform repairs, or if you want to ask for a credit in lieu of repairs. Now, a lot of people think that the option period is the only time that you can ask for a seller to perform repairs. This is not the case. It's just the time when you as a buyer have the most leverage. You see, if you have the ability to terminate and walk away, then you have more leverage in asking the seller to participate. But in reality, a negotiation can happen at any time during the contract as long as both buyer and seller agree. During a hot real estate market, we were seeing that a lot of buyers were waiving their option period. And this meant that in order to make their offer stand out and be more attractive, they were taking away their right to terminate. This is such a dangerous strategy because you are going in saying, I don't care what's wrong with the house, I want it anyways. Eesh. This is a really big risk. Do not gamble on your biggest investment. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other areas of the contract that we can use to exit appropriately, but this is your number one most aggressive way to terminate. Now, one thing I will advise you of, be very careful of homes that look pretty in pictures and look pretty in person, but may not be pretty on the underside. And in the industry, we call these flips. And that's not to say that all flips are bad, because I personally have actually flipped a home, but I did it a little differently. You see, we came in and we changed the flooring, we changed the fixtures, we changed the countertops. We did a lot of stuff cosmetically to make it look good. We also had a structural engineer evaluate the foundation. We also had the roof replaced, and we also did the things that needed to be done on a structural level. A lot of people are trying to get the most money for their investment, and they don't necessarily do the things behind the wall that a buyer won't see. Now, I made no money on the flip, which is why I was a one and done kind of girl. But a lot of people in that industry don't operate that way. So be very, very careful. And this is where the inspector comes in, and he'll tell you what he's seeing, and he'll tell you to bring out the specialists, and he'll say, hey, look, let's have an HVAC guy look at this, or hey, bring out a roofer and decide if this is something that needs to be addressed or not. And in that moment, call out those specialists, spend the extra time and the extra money, and get it evaluated. General inspectors are not supposed to give their opinion on properties. So if they do, listen to them. You see, I have inspectors that I trust and they'll wink at me or nod at me or, they'll do some stuff like that. But I did have one inspector one time say, hey, Ashley, I would not walk away from this property. I would run. And in that moment, we listened because there's always something hiding behind the walls. The repairs that were overlooked or skipped or intentionally hidden by the investors. Just be very, very careful. Do your research and hire an inspector that you trust. While you're doing all of this, delivering your earnest money, delivering your option fee, scheduling your inspections, you also are going to be in communication constantly with your lender because you're going to be gathering documents that they need to substantiate the loan that you've applied for. Now, if you do this right, you would have done most of the homework for the lender on the front end before going under contract. But that's not to say that they don't need additional documents because as your file goes through the underwriting process, the underwriter is going to flag different things and they'll need you to verify documents along the way. The other thing that I need you to do while you're waiting for your inspection to happen is to reach out to your homeowner's insurance agent. Give them the new address, the location, the square footage, any information that they might need. They're going to ask you for the age of the roof, which you can find in your seller's disclosure, and they're going to run a proper quote for you. And pro tip, if you did not know, homeowners insurance in my area has gone up exponentially. And so it is possible that the cost of insuring this new property that you've already fallen in love with may not be within your budget. So do not get through the option period without getting this estimate, because the very worst thing for you to do is to come out the other side, have lost your right to terminate, and realize that you can't afford the monthly payments. So you have the results of the inspection back. You've negotiated repairs with the seller. You've all come to terms. Whether it was money in lieu of repairs, seller to perform the repairs, or a reduction in sales price, you guys have come to terms and you're ready to move forward. Now what? Now you call your lender and you let him know, I'm ready to order the appraisal. Now in some situations you'll want to order the appraisal earlier than that, but in most cases you'll want to wait till you get to the end of the option period to make sure that you are in fact moving forward with a house and you aren't paying for an appraisal on a house that you aren't intending to purchase. The appraisal is done by third-party appraisers, and the lender cannot influence which appraiser is selected for the property. So what they do is they send out a request, an appraiser picks it up, and then they schedule it with the listing agent. So what is an appraisal? Well, the appraisal is the lender's value of the property, and they're not going to loan more than what they determine a property is worth. So there's a lot of different ways to negotiate a contract, and one of those ways is maybe you buffer the sales price and ask for money from the seller for you to be able to perform certain repairs after closing. Only do this if you are confident that the home will appraise. Because maybe you do that on the front end too soon without the appraisal, and then the appraisal comes in shorter than you expect it to, and now you're in another renegotiation period with the seller, and maybe you don't win out as much as you would have if you had structured it a little bit differently. The appraiser has so much power in this situation because they can kill a deal or push a deal forward, and it is all up to them and the properties that they compare the home to. Usually, they will use homes within a very tight radius, but not always. If they can't find what they determine are recent comparable sales within, say, a 1 or 2 mile radius, then they start to branch out, and then they branch out a little bit further. And maybe they tweak different pieces and components of a property until they feel like they've satisfied the criteria for comparable sales. That report holds all the power. That report goes back to the lender. The lender will then call the buyer and say the home appraised for this much. That lender will also call the listing agent and say we either met value or we did not meet value. At that point, if it meets value, you're good to move forward. If it does not meet value, you're in a renegotiation with the seller. The appraiser can also give recommendations or requirements for a loan to move forward. For example, I just sold a home where the appraiser came in and said, I need you to evaluate the foundation and I need to require you to replace the roof. They also reduced the value of the property $10,000 from where the contract was until what they determined the home was worth. Now, we initially asked the question, okay, great, if we replace the roof, does that value go up? And they said, no, that value is based on you replacing the roof. So this seller had a mountain in front of him. He had to replace the roof and he had to take a $10,000 hit, or renegotiate with the buyer. Different loan types also carry different type of appraisals. For example, if you have an FHA or a VA loan, that appraisal will stick with the property for a period of time. If you have a conventional loan, the appraisal does not stick with the property. So there is a little bit more risk as a seller to accepting one of these first two types of loans. Not to say you shouldn't do it, it's just something you need to be aware of. Because if that value comes in lower than what the contract price is, and buyer and seller part ways, and the home goes back on the market, and you bring in another VA or FHA buyer, that appraiser for each of those respective types of loans is stuck with that previous appraisal for a period of time. Conversely, if you have a conventional buyer and it comes in low and you part ways, the home goes back on the market, the new buyer gets their own appraisal. So you made it through all the hard stuff. You made it through inspections, an appraisal, and renegotiations with the seller if necessary. But now what? Well, now you get to relax. You see the title company's working on the back end and the lender's trying to get you approved for the loan. The agents are working together to get everything to the closing table. And you are the only one that doesn't have to do a thing except imagine what your life is going to look like in this new house. And you're going to wait for a call from the lender and he's going to say, congratulations, we are clear to close. Now in the industry, you'll hear it referred to as CTC. And those are my 3 favorite letters because I know as a listing agent, when the other agent calls me and says, hey, we're CTC, great. Now I'll let the lender speak to all the steps that happen on their side so that I don't have to step out of my lane. But I will tell you that when that moment comes, the house is yours. We as agents are going to schedule a final walkthrough, and that's your opportunity to go into the house and make sure it's still in the condition that you want to purchase it. Make sure that nothing happened along the way. Make sure that maybe there was a freeze and there wasn't any flooding. Make sure that the HVAC units are still working and functional. Make sure that that home is ready for you to move in and love the way that you expect to. Now, I wouldn't mention those things if each of them hadn't happened. So don't miss this very important opportunity to walk through the house and put your eyes on it just one more time. After that, we're going to schedule your closing. The closing is where you go to the closing table and sign the documents. Most closings happen at a title company in front of an escrow agent because they're licensed notaries. Those documents, the majority of them are either lender forms or title forms, and so you want that escrow agent to be able to explain those to you. In rare cases, you can do DocuSign, and sometimes you even have a mobile notary where they bring the documents to you. It is very, very convenient, but a lot of times those notaries aren't trained at the same level as the escrow agents, so they may not be able to explain them in as much detail. I highly encourage you to go to the title company if at all possible. The biggest misconception is that when you as a buyer sign the documents, that the house is yours, and that's not exactly true. There's a lot of steps that happen from the moment that you sign until we as agents can actually give you the keys to your new home. So let's play it out. You show up to the closing table and you sign the documents. The seller shows up and signs the documents. Those signed documents are then sent back to the lender. The lender reviews the documents for any clerical errors and then gives approval to the title company and releases funds to the title company. The title company then releases money from their account to the seller's account. At that point, that file is considered closed and funded. We get the call as agents that the file is closed and funded, and then we can give you the keys to your house. Now, if all of that happens before the wire cutoff, then the seller will see the money the same day. So if you sign early in the morning, it is likely that the seller will see their money by the end of the day. However, if either party signs later in the day, it technically cannot fund until the following day, which means that we can't give you your keys until the following day. This is important because you need to know when to set up your utilities to start, when to start your homeowner's insurance, when to schedule movers. So please, if at all possible, if you need access that same day, try to schedule a morning appointment to make sure that you fund that same day. If there's a lease back in place or if you don't intend to move in right away, then that morning appointment is not as important. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. It really does make a difference. My main goal here is just to make real estate a little less stressful and a lot more fun. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.